how being stubborn is sabotaging your potential. Let me ask you something unsettling right off the bat. What if the very trait you're most proud of, your unwavering determination, your fierce commitment to your beliefs, is the very thing holding you back from becoming who you're meant to be? What if your stubbornness, that refusal to budge, that resistance to being wrong, is not a strength, but a silent saboteur? In this video, we're going on a journey, a deep philosophical excavation of the mind, where we'll challenge the comfortable, confront the familiar, and open up the locked doors of our own thinking. If you've ever felt stuck or wondered why your progress plateaus while others seem to evolve, this might be the reason. You've confused stubbornness for strength and closed-mindedness for confidence. We all do it. I do it. You do it. We dig our heels into the ground when someone challenges us. We cling tightly to beliefs we've held for years, even as evidence mounts against them. Why? Because being right feels safe. Because changing our mind feels like a defeat. But here's the paradox. The more we insist on being right, the more we become prisoners of our own outdated ideas. We become blind to better ways of thinking, better ways of living, and better versions of ourselves. And worst of all, we don't even realize it's happening.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Stubbornness often masquerades as strength. It wears the mask of decisiveness, confidence, and conviction. Society even rewards it. We praise people who stand their ground and never back down. But let's pause and think a little deeper. Is a tree strong because it resists the wind, or because it bends with it? Is a mind strong because it never changes, or because it's constantly growing? If we measure strength by resilience, then surely a resilient mind must be one that adapts, not one that stiffens with pride. Let's take a moment to reflect on how many of our core beliefs were chosen by us, really chosen, versus how many were absorbed passively. Our culture, our family, our religion, our social circles, all of them shape our beliefs long before we ever get the chance to critically evaluate them. And once those beliefs are in place, we defend them as if they are sacred. We become stubborn not because we're wise, but because we're afraid of uncertainty, afraid of being wrong, afraid of the identity crisis that might come if we admit we need to change. But here's where things get really profound. The greatest minds in history, from Socrates to Einstein, were not known for how stubbornly they clung to ideas. They were known for how courageously they questioned them. Socrates famously said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." Think about that. Real wisdom begins where certainty ends. The more certain you are, the less space there is for growth. The more rigid you're thinking, the more fragile your mind becomes. Let me give you a personal example. There was a time in my life when I was absolutely convinced that success meant grinding 24/7, never stopping, never showing weakness. I was stubborn about it. I defended it. I judged people who rested or took breaks. But the irony? That mindset was destroying me. I burned out. I lost relationships. I was exhausted and unfulfilled. It wasn't until I let go, until I opened my mind to the idea that rest is not weakness and that balance is not failure, that I actually began to grow. I became more productive, more focused, and, most importantly, more human. So here's the real question. What beliefs are you stubbornly clinging to right now that might be sabotaging your potential? What truths have you accepted without question, and defend it out of habit, not understanding. What if the thing you're most certain of is the very thing that's keeping you small? Being open-minded doesn't mean lacking conviction. It means being willing to update your beliefs when better evidence appears. It means valuing truth over ego. It means asking, "What am I missing?" instead of saying, "I already know." And that simple shift from knowing to curiosity is where real transformation begins. In the next part of this journey, we're going to explore how stubbornness becomes a silent prison, a mental fortress that feels protective but actually isolates us from truth, growth, and connection. We'll dig into the psychology of identity, ego, and fear, and how they trick us into resisting change, even when change is exactly what we need. The invisible prison of certainty, how ego and identity keep us stuck. Here's something most people never realize. The mind doesn't just hold beliefs, it builds itself around them. Every belief we hold, every idea we defend, becomes a brick in the structure of our identity. Over time, that structure becomes more than just a worldview. It becomes who we think we are. And once we identify with an idea, letting go of it feels like letting go of a part of ourselves. That's why being open-minded is so difficult. It's not just about changing your mind, it's about confronting the fear of losing yourself. Think about it. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where someone challenges your beliefs and instead of listening, your heart rate rises, your muscles tighten, and a wall of defensiveness goes up? That's not logic kicking in, that's ego. The ego doesn't care about truth, it cares about protection. It wants to maintain the illusion that we are consistent, correct, and in control. But here's the irony. The more we build our identity on being right, the more fragile we actually become. Because the moment someone presents a better idea, we feel threatened, not because we disagree, but because we're afraid of what agreeing would mean for who we are. The ego is terrified of uncertainty. It wants everything to fit into neat boxes, to be labeled, controlled, and predictable. But life isn't neat. It's chaotic, ever-changing, and mysterious. When we refuse to adapt, when we cling to certainty in a world that thrives on flux, we suffer. We miss opportunities, we damage relationships, and we limit our potential. And all the while, we convince ourselves that we're being strong or principled, when in truth, we're just scared. Let's go deeper. Why do we fear change so much? It's because change requires death. Not literal death, but the death of an outdated version of ourselves. And just like physical death, the death of an identity can feel terrifying. If I've always believed that I'm not creative, what happens when I start to write or paint and discover I was wrong? That belief dies, and with it, the version of myself that leaned on that excuse. Or, if I've always seen myself as the logical one, how do I cope when emotions start to rise and I realize I've been avoiding vulnerability? Another ego death. It's painful, but it's also necessary, because without these little deaths, we never get to be reborn. That's where stubbornness becomes more than just a personality quirk, it becomes a trap. We don't even notice it happening, we just keep defending the same ideas, reacting to the same triggers, and repeating the same patterns. Over time, our mind becomes a fortress, safe, controlled, but ultimately lonely and stagnant. And the worst part, we mistake the walls we've built for protection when really they're keeping us from life itself. Here's something to reflect on. What part of your identity are you clinging to, not because it serves you, but because it feels safe? What belief do you keep defending even though deep down you suspect it might not be true anymore? What would happen if you let it go? Who might you become? Open-mindedness is not weakness, it's courage. It's the courage to say, I don't know everything. It's the courage to admit I might have been wrong. It's the courage to change. And change, real change, is one of the most terrifying and liberating things we can ever do. Not because it's easy, but because it requires the surrender of control. It demands a leap into the unknown. In the next part, we'll explore the hidden cost of stubbornness in our relationships, careers, and personal growth, how it shows up in subtle ways, how it ruins opportunities before we even notice, and how we can start breaking free from it with one powerful mental shift. When stubbornness steals your future, hidden costs and invisible losses. Most of us think of stubbornness as a personality trait, just one of those quirks we have, like being a night owl or not liking pineapple on pizza. But what we rarely stop to consider is that stubbornness has a cost, and not just a surface-level cost. It's a quiet thief, slowly stealing from our relationships, our opportunities, our growth, and ultimately our future. The cruel part, we often don't even notice what we've lost until it's too late. It slips through the cracks of our pride, hidden behind a mask of conviction. Think about a time you refused to listen to someone, not because they were wrong, but because you didn't want to admit they might be right. Maybe it was a friend giving you advice you didn't want to hear. Maybe it was a partner asking you to see things from their perspective. Maybe it was a mentor urging you to pivot, to evolve. But you didn't. You dug in. You told yourself you were staying true to your values. But what if it wasn't values you were defending? What if it was fear? And what did you miss out on by refusing to bend? A stronger connection? A better opportunity? A lesson that could have changed your path. We tend to romanticize the idea of standing firm. We admire people who don't back down, who stay true to themselves. But being true to yourself doesn't mean being unmoving. It means being honest. And sometimes honesty means admitting that the path you're on no longer serves you, that the mindset you've been clinging to is outdated, that the version of you who made that decision 5 years ago doesn't exist anymore. But if we're too stubborn to accept that, we trap ourselves in a life that no longer fits. We become relics of our past, living in futures that could have been so much more. In relationships, stubbornness can be devastating. It turns conversations into competitions. It replaces empathy with ego. It trades connection for control. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to create distance where there should be understanding. People stop opening up to you, not because they don't care, but because they feel unheard. And as the walls go up, you might tell yourself, I'm just being real, or I'm not going to change for anyone. But ask yourself this, what good is authenticity if it costs you love? What's the point of being right if it leaves you alone? In careers, stubbornness looks like refusing to adapt. It's staying at the same job because it's what I've always done. It's rejecting new tools, new ideas, or new strategies because the old way worked. But time doesn't care about your comfort zone. The world moves forward whether you do or not. And those who grow are not the ones who cling, they're the ones who listen, learn, and evolve. Every moment you spend defending a limiting belief is a moment you could have spent building a better future. So ask yourself, where is your stubbornness costing you silently? What have you already lost by refusing to change? And more importantly, what could you still lose if you don't open your mind now? In the final part of this journey, we're going to talk about the antidote. How do we take our stubbornness, our fear of being wrong, our identity wrapped in certainty, and turn it into curiosity, growth, and transformation? The answer is simpler and more powerful than you might think. The courage to be wrong, reclaiming growth through open-mindedness. There's a quiet revolution that takes place the moment you stop trying to be right and start being curious. Not the surface-level curiosity that looks good in interviews or social media bios, but the radical, soul-deep curiosity that's willing to dismantle everything you thought you knew. That kind of curiosity takes courage. Because being open-minded isn't passive. It's not about being agreeable or indecisive. It's about having the bravery to admit that your current perspective might be incomplete, that your beliefs, no matter how cherished, might need revising, and that's terrifying. But it's also how you grow. We live in a world that rewards certainty. People want you to have strong opinions, to stand for something, to never waver. But here's the truth no one talks about. Certainty is cheap. Anyone can be loud, anyone can double down, anyone can say I already know, but it takes a rare kind of strength to say I might be wrong. That's not weakness, that's power. Because the person who can admit they don't know is the only one who can truly learn. Think about the people you admire, truly admire. Chances are they're not the ones who bulldoze their way through conversations or live in a fortress of unshakable beliefs. They're the ones who listen, who evolve, who ask questions that make you think. Why? Because when someone is genuinely open to new ideas, they become a mirror that reflects your own deeper potential. They remind you that growth is not about stacking up more information or proving your intelligence. It's about expanding the borders of your mind again and again for the rest of your life. So how do we begin to unlearn stubbornness? It starts with small, intentional acts. The next time you're in a disagreement, try asking, "What am I not seeing?" instead of defending your stance. When someone shares a perspective that challenges yours, pause and ask yourself, could this be true, even a little? And when you feel triggered or offended or resistant, don't just react, inquire. Ask, why does this idea threaten me? What part of me feels exposed? Behind every moment of resistance is an invitation to grow. But you'll only hear it if you're willing to listen. Open-mindedness isn't just a mindset, it's a lifestyle. It means continuously updating your beliefs like software. It means understanding that knowledge is not a destination but a process. And it means realizing that the most intelligent thing you can do isn't to know everything, but to remain teachable. Because the world is full of wisdom, hidden in books, in strangers, in failures, in moments of silence. But if your mind is closed, none of it can reach you. Here's the final question I want to leave you with. Who could you become if you let go of being right all the time? What dreams could you chase? What relationships could you heal? What new version of yourself could you unlock if you simply dared to be wrong? The truth is, we don't grow by doubling down. We grow by letting go. Letting go of pride, letting go of fear, letting go of the illusion that we already have all the answers. Because the real journey, the one that changes everything, begins not when you shout, but when you listen. Not when you win an argument, but when you ask a better question. And not when you cling to who you've been, but when you finally give yourself permission to become who you truly are. So don't let stubbornness steal your future. Trade it for curiosity. Trade it for growth. Trade it for the possibility of becoming someone wiser, freer, and more alive than you ever imagined. That's the power of an open mind. That's the courage to be wrong. And that is where your real potential begins.